So I'm still reading Saga. But yeah, it's pretty much well established that I'm still a massive fan of the comic, or at least the earlier portions of it. And of course, obviously, I'm keeping up to date with it and seeing the stats of it, mostly not because out of pure hatred, but out of mostly worry, well, mostly hope that it would improve somewhat. But I won't lie, these last issues prior to these couple months have been semi-decent. They weren't as insulting up to like the last time I made that video a while back, pretty much going over like the current events and current goings on in the story and seeing where the characters ended up and seeing what was actually going on, and almost as if Brian didn't exactly know where his story was really headed, like as if he was just pulling shit out of his ass, especially since like certain characters were making decisions that didn't really make any sense, characters that got killed, i.e. Sophie, where they didn't really need to be. So like, yeah, like there's so much to say about like but what happened to like those issues like in between Marco's death and up to Sophie's death, almost as if there was like a massive like downturn in the comic. It just dipped in quality even more so. But the funny thing is that reading it now, issues 67 to 70 currently, I would say that there is a very odd but very steadily return to form. Like the quality has somewhat increased a bit, if I was to be honest. Brian does seem to steer things around a bit, like there clearly seems to be a bit of a direction that the story is actually headed, where as opposed to before things kind of just happened, here we're actually seeing things unfold and we're seeing the story and characters shape up in a bit. Now, let me actually get into a bit more detail. Now, cutting a bit shenanigans, major spoilers, I'm going to go into massive details here, but the family being Hazel, Alana, and Squire have pretty much joined this Astro Circus, basically going around and pretty much assisting them. Like Alana helps out the clowns, Hazel and Squire like have their own little bunk, and of course like Hazel does also help out so that they earn their keep. And there is some hilarity, some comedy is not terrible, some of it's actually got a few chuckles out of me, and it's also nice the fact that we delve a bit more into like Alana and Hazel, of course, and the goings on, like ever and what's happened in the last like in-universe years that have actually happened. Oh yeah, also in the circus, Hazel actually makes a new friend who is the same spider species that the Stalk was in the very early beginning issues of Saga, which probably caused a lot of major drama and PTSD in some fans, but they're obviously not related. But it is pretty neat to see that type of species somewhat return as a main character, even or as a major side character, if that makes sense, as we do like see her and Sophie like put makeup on and her trying to get Sophie to be part of a band and play guitar, and Hazel's not good at it at all. And it's actually kind of fun and kind of cute seeing this, and it does bring back like what Saga used to be, where it was in the beginning, like stages in the beginning, like 20 or so issues. And kind of circle back to Alana. Funny enough, she's nowhere near as insufferable as she was the last like volume or two. We actually see a bit more of her like eternal struggles, which like she wants what's best for Hazel and Squire, since she's no longer just raising Hazel, she's raising Squire as well, because Squire pretty much lost everything. If y'all don't really remember, if y'all who've read the comic already know that Prince Fourth and his wife are both dead, and of course Squire is pretty much like an orphan. So of course Alana has to pretty much pick up those pieces and raise them as her own, which is even more so hard and fucked up for Squire. The fact that Alana obviously lost Marco, so not only she has to raise these two kids, but she has to raise her by herself, and we do see that take a toll on her. We actually see her break down and actually talk about that several times throughout like this current volume, and there's even a really good talk and discussion around like issue 69 where Alana actually talks to Squire and also we do see a bit more of Squire's eternal struggle and him basically watching VR TV, if that's the best way to describe it, where he's basically watching the war footage and how his family have contributed to it, and he does feel guilty of it, despite him not really wanting anything to do with it and practically having nothing to do with it. He does feel that weight on his shoulders, kind of accidentally like hurts himself. And there is a really good scene discussion where Alana actually breaks down crying to talking to Squire, actually telling him that he isn't a monster and that he actually is someone that she does care for and that people do care for him. And despite them not being related, it is a really good and well written scene that actually has a lot of emotion, a lot of weight to it, and does really have that heavy tone that Saga actually did have in the beginning. And it's good to see that kind of back here, that level of sincerity. Now, I'm not saying what happened previous volumes wasn't sincere, but it felt disingenuous in a way, where characters, well, Gwendolyn or other characters for that matter, would say or do something and it would not feel genuine, or they will come across as massively hypocritical in a way. Well, here it's not the case at all, and it is earned and it is done really well, and it actually does add some weight to everything. To also move forward, Gwendolyn and the Will are both broken up from Sophie's death, and even though I despise those two characters, Brian does attempt to put some emotion behind those two and behind their grief, and even Gwendolyn even asks Will to give her a piece of the hallucinogenic substance that he accidentally got on planet like very early on in Saga, where Will has basically been hallucinating like all these characters who basically died and passed away. He sees the Stalk, he sees his sister, he sees like all these other characters and stuff like that, and Gwendolyn wants that because she wants to see Sophie. She really wants this pain of this grief to go away. And we see in the next issue later on, she's crying, and to my actual shock, she sees Marco. She doesn't see Sophie, or at least at first. Now, I'm intrigued here. I actually do want to see what's going to happen later on with these two, and it does kind of go back to that, well, skull cucking scene where Gwendolyn's actually crying, and that maybe in fact she wasn't crying tears of joy at all, and that she was actually broken up and sad, and she just fucks the Will out of means to cope, basically, to tell herself that no, I do not love Marco, I hate Marco, and I'm gonna prove it to myself. I'm gonna fuck this guy right here and now. Now, I'm hoping it goes there. Saga has been really smart writing wise in the past, and I hope Brian might go this way, but I've been wrong in the past before, but I'm gonna be on the edge of my seat here though, because it is neat to see that Gwendolyn actually calls Marco beloved, like darling, and that she clearly had emotional feelings towards him, and the fact that he's the first one she hallucinates does show that she indeed did care. So I do hope, and I am looking forward to like what's gonna happen in the future though with her character as well. Around issue, like I said, recent issue 70, Squire actually asked to go away. We get some insight, and he wants to go to basically a camp so he can have some time away from everything, basically. And we do see some more insight. He does talk to Hazel, and she does have genuine concerns for him, and that because of course he's a robot with a screen on his face, he can accidentally show off who he really is, him being royalty. But we do see a really funny scene where she screams at him just to get him to react, and nothing actually happens, showing that he has come a long way and he does have some control over his face screen, pretty much. And also a really well done callback that happens later on in the same issue. We actually get a skish. For those of you who have not read the comic at all, it is basically when Marco, Alana hug Hazel from in between, and she's like a little kid. And this was like way back in the earlier issues where she says, "Oh, skish," like, which is a squish, basically. Alana didn't know what it was, and Marco pretty much told her, "Oh, she wants us to hug with her in between." And it's really cute to see that come back here and actually have that little flood of nostalgia come right back, and a nice little bit of emotion right there. We do get some more a little bit of the background intrigue with a agent tracking the family down, and it does end on a pretty strong cliffhanger, and one that I actually am looking forward to the next issue. I genuinely want to see what is going to happen in the next issue of Saga, in issue 71. I actually want to see how this volume is going to end, and that's kind of crazy how this is like the first time in what might be years I'm actually looking forward to a new issue of Saga, and that's kind of why I'm kind of thinking is this comic turning around? Like, is Brian actually devoting real attention to this and is actually taking this seriously and actually has ideas going around? Now, I'm not saying that, oh, Brian always had this plan. No, I still stand by what I said about those issues that I had problems with. Those earlier issues are still weaker. They still flooded with problems, and there's a lot to say about them. But here, there's a lot more emotion, there's a lot more care. There definitely seems to be an attempt to harken back to what Saga was originally. Obviously, Brian cannot retcon and bring characters back. That's not what Saga is. Despite it being a fantastical sci-fi fantasy spanning graphic novel, it still is fairly grounded in some ways. Characters do in fact die and they stay dead, and like, it's good to see that. Oh, and another thing, I have not mentioned Petrichor. Now, I have issue with Petrichor in the past now, and I still do have issues with her, and part of me does wish that Brian would go back to his earlier issues and kind of redo her introduction. It has not aged well at all, and I still stand by the fact it has not aged well at all, but we do get some more of her, and it's really awesome seeing what he's doing with her, what Brian's doing with her, and that we see that Sophie's death actually does fuck with her a lot. In a club scene where she's taking Fade away, this drug, this hallucinogenic in Saga, a different drug than the one that Gwendolyn took and Will took. It's different than that. It's a drug that's been in a series for a long while now. If you've read the comic for a long time, you would know what it is. And she takes it and she sees Sophie, and she's clearly fucked up about it, and she is about to cry, and it's actually tearing her up inside that her quest for revenge killed this innocent child. And we see in the next issue that she actually runs into the teacher from the prison arc, which was actually a cameo I did not expect to see. And it's kind of neat seeing older characters make a return, or older characters that survived make a return, and it's good seeing her back. And Petrichor does talk to her and say, I deserve to be in that prison. Like, I am a monster. Like, what I have done, there is no salvation for me. I deserve to go back there. And that's another thing, another character, another storyline I actually want to see continue. And I wonder if she goes back to that prison, she's going to run back into Marco's mother, and I would like to see that dynamic go out. And I would wonder if does Brian want to bring those two characters together and have them break out of prison and then have them run with the family and then have them reunite? Like, is that the plan? Like, you see I have not speculated positively about this series in some time, and it's cool to actually think that, like, it's actually cool to see where this is going. That's just another thing, like, that's kind of rad. So I do actually wonder, like, is this actually turning around? Obviously, though, sadly, I will say this, Saga, where it is right now, even though it's really good. It's good. It's better than what it has been in the past. It's nowhere near as good as it was in its early issues. Those earlier issues, those early volumes, those early story arcs are some of the best that I've read, period. Like, there was just so much care put into those earlier volumes, and the strength of those characters really hold up, even with all the issues that come later on. I actually do hope that Saga kind of comes back to that, and I actually would love to see what goes on later on down the line, and it's kind of awesome to say that. This is kind of the reason why I continued reading Saga even after all these years, out of actual hope that it's going to get better. And in a way it kind of has, but anything can happen. It can go right back downhill in the next couple issues, who knows? But I will say I'm actually looking forward to what's going to happen in the next couple issues, and I do hope and I do wonder what's going to happen later on down the line. What other future storylines does Brian have planned? And maybe Saga might indeed, in a couple years or in another decade, reach that milestone that Brian actually set for himself. And maybe it will actually end up better than what we thought, or it can end up like Walking Dead and we'll just have its highs and lows, and it will just end on a very low note. We shall see, but right now, I will not lie, I'm excited. So yeah.